Pokemon Arceus is a non-mainline Pokemon game released between Generation 8 and Generation 9 of the popular Pokemon series of games. Lore-wise, it is set in the same region as Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, Generation 4, but it is set many hundreds or even thousands of years beforehand. Apparently not, it's only 200 years beforehand, but there you go. So it's a couple of hundred years beforehand, before Pokemon are overall understood by the general population. The story follows you, the main character, who inexplicably falls from the sky from some sort of space-time rift and magically is considered more competent at catching Pokemon and battling Pokemon than anyone else in the region. This seems rather convenient at first glance, but actually is one of the best explanations Pokemon has ever given for your character being so competent so quickly, and also provides a somewhat believable excuse for the other characters to exposit and explain the mechanics of the game. Arceus is a breath of fresh air from the usually extremely similar mainline Pokemon games by providing an experience that mixes up the formula enough to be interesting while still sticking to the core gameplay concepts to make it feel somewhat familiar to fans of the franchise. Instead of battles that take you out of engine onto a battle screen, the battles occur in-engine, allowing for a wholly smoother and more polished experience, while the game encourages you to catch multiple of the same Pokemon in order to fill out your Pokédex, something thus far unique to Arceus. This, coupled with the somewhat open-world nature of the game, provides a relaxed and permitting atmosphere while still providing a structured story. Honestly, the fact that you can just meander around in areas, catching and defeating Pokemon without having to think much about what you're doing, provides the most enjoyably relaxing experience I've ever encountered in a Pokemon game. While this core gameplay loop is adorably relaxing in its simplicity, I do feel that it has a habit of making the game feel a little repetitive, especially in moments where the story essentially stops and insists you level up before you can go to the next area. A frustrating mechanic that encourages grinding and destroys the otherwise commendable, albeit casual, pace of the game. This, coupled with a set of side missions that severely lack variety, does make for a game that overall struggles for compelling content, in my opinion. Luckily, the main story is one of the stronger entries to the Pokemon series, surrounding how the same space-time rift that brought your character to the region is also interfering with several of the more important Pokemon in the region, causing them to enrage and turn on their human allies. The supporting cast are fleshed out well enough that you want to help them solve this issue, and enough mystery and intrigue is maintained to keep the player guessing and interested in how the overall story will play out. On the subject of the side missions, I have to say I'm left entirely disappointed. Although they start off promisingly, it becomes clearer and clearer as the game goes on that all the side missions boil down to are one of three things. Either catch this Pokemon, complete this Pokemon's Pokédex entry, or fetch this item. The game tries to switch things up occasionally by being vague about the type of Pokemon required to complete the mission, like catch a Pokemon with a springy tail, but this gets old pretty quickly and doesn't really add anything but an added frustration to an already plain side mission. Overall, while I feel it can be rewarding to complete a side mission while completing part of the main objective or grinding to increase your level, I feel that the side missions were probably the weakest part of the game and left me increasingly disinterested and disappointed. And on the subject of the supporting characters, I feel that overall, the core supporting characters are varied, interesting, believable, and well fleshed out within the narrative, although I do feel there are rather too many characters in the game in general, which can get confusing when this is all compounded by the fact that several of the characters use exactly the same or extremely similar models. I feel the game could have expanded greatly on its relaxing simplicity by reducing the number of characters and just providing the existing characters with more to say. What I think I really like about this game is the departure from the normal formula, while still staying true to its foundation of being a Pokemon game. Gone is the gym challenge. Instead, each area is defined by a boss that involves you jumping around, avoiding the attacks of a giant angry Pokemon while throwing its favourite food at it, interspersed with clever interludes where your Pokemon can battle the boss to provide you with an edge. Although narratively, throwing balls of food to calm down an angry Pokemon is dubious at best, in terms of gameplay, this provides a fun and interesting challenge that is entirely different to any other Pokemon game to date. These encounters are widely spread enough with slight variations to each encounter that they don't ever really feel mundane and keep the pace of the game fresh and prevent it from feeling too sluggish. Trainer battles are also largely done away with to focus more on battling and catching wild Pokemon, although they do pop up here and there. The game does attempt to provide a Team Rocket-like antagonist in the form of the Misfortune Sisters. The mere fact that their name, both the name of their team and their individual names, are puns is already a red flag, and this theme is carried through by the actions and dialogue of the characters. They are lame, their dialogue is cringe, and they have a Wonder Twin Powers Engage energy that feels out of place in the narrative. Their motivation also doesn't entirely make sense, and they feel tacked in to increase the otherwise negligible trainer battles the game would have without them. Unfortunately, even this is undermined by the fact they will always field the same few Pokemon every time you fight them, limiting their purpose and really just making me wish they didn't exist in the game at all. I do feel this is the only real place the game missteps in terms of characters though. It is just a shame they are in the game as much as they are. Changing the subject to controls, I do feel that the controls are a little on the confusing side in general, although I have to admit this may be just because it took me a while to get used to, as the controls are a little different to other games. I honestly found myself pressing the wrong button quite regularly, especially when finding the right menu. I'm willing to admit that this may be slightly more a me issue than bad controls, but I'm not entirely convinced either. I also have to say a word on the trials posed in order to attain the red chain. I understand the game is trying to be novel by providing out-of-the-box challenges, but a quiz on how many eyes a certain Pokemon has is only going to encourage a player to put the game down and search the answer online. And the test of patience, where you essentially have to wait for a Pokemon to give you a reward, is honestly one of the worst minigames I've ever experienced. Testing a player's patience is never, ever a good idea. Most people have their patience tested enough in their real lives and would be playing a game like Pokemon as escapism from that real life. Games which inadvertently test players' patience are often branded as bad games, and good games with mechanics that accidentally test a player's patience will usually have reviews that say, "The game was great except this one annoying mechanic." Purposefully testing a player's patience is the single worst idea in game design I have ever heard of, and frankly, the person who thought this was a good idea should be fired. I'm not even joking. If I want my patience to be tested, I'll log into my work phone, thank you. If I was rating the game on a star system, I would take a full star off for this tiny segment purely on principle. And finally, I couldn't review Arceus without saying a few words about the music. I do think the music was generally great, as each separate track was either a bop or added to the atmosphere of the area. My only real problem with it was the seemingly random moments certain tracks triggered. This happened several times where I would be exploring an area with appropriate music playing in the background, and then suddenly the music would just cut to a samba. The samba was a great track, don't get me wrong, but it didn't really fit with the mood of what was happening in the game at the time, and the sudden way that it jump cut in, and eventually out, destroyed my immersion for a few moments. This is a great example of something amazing being implemented clumsily and really demoted my overall opinion of the music in the game. In conclusion, I think Legends Arceus is a decent entry to the franchise that provides a strong, for Pokemon, story and a brilliant shake-up of the usual formula while remaining true to the core values of the franchise. But for me, it remains in the same category I'd place pretty much every other Pokemon game in. If you're already a fan of Pokemon, I'd go so far as to say that Arceus is fun enough to be a must-play. But for anyone who isn't already a fan inquiring about the franchise, I'm still unlikely to recommend Pokemon Legends Arceus, as in my opinion, it doesn't provide compelling enough gameplay or story to hook in a new player.